Revenge with Karen. They say silence is golden, but in a server room at 3 a.m., silence means something's dying. That's what I told myself the night the transaction log stopped breathing for 2.6 million users. But let's rewind, because corporate carnage doesn't start with fire. It starts with suits talking about agility like it's a personality trait. My name's Linda. I'm 48, and a senior systems analyst for longer than most of the interns have been alive. I don't wear hoodies. I don't speak in scrums, and I don't write code for aesthetics. I write it to work. I've been with this company for 2 decades, which is 140 in tech years. I built our real-time financial platform back when the Y2K bug had people stockpiling canned soup and gasoline. You'd never know it by looking at me. No one in a corner office ever asked how that system still processed $20 million daily without coughing up a lung. But every time an outage loomed and the newbies cried rollback, someone always whispered, "Get Linda." I was the failsafe, the dinosaur, the ghost in the machine. And I was just fine with that, until the CEO decided dinosaurs weren't on brand. Enter the reorg memo. Modernizing Workflows Initiative. They gave it a logo. That's how you knew it was serious, when it had a logo and a Slack channel. Now, before we go further, if you've made it this far, do me and my team a favor. Only 3% of folks listening are actually subscribed to this channel, and it's kinda wild. If you're enjoying these war stories from corporate hell, hit the like button, maybe even the subscribe. It helps more than you think. It lets us keep digging up the good stuff from the bones of HR disasters past. Back to the massacre. The memo was pure tech bro word salad, streamline legacy bottlenecks, cloud-forward frameworks, internal innovation incubator. Translation: let's let the CEO's nephew tinker with the codebase like it's a Lego set. But we didn't know that yet. At first, it was just meetings. Lots of meetings, with people who looked like they'd never debugged anything more complex than a PowerPoint slide. Every time I mentioned the word redundancy, someone would groan like I was ordering soup in Latin. My notes went ignored. My documented concerns, buried in folders no one opened. Still, I kept doing the work. Quietly, reliably. Every transaction checkpoint, every deadlock contingency, every obscure vendor clause, logged, tested, hardened by fire. Then one Monday morning, I noticed something odd. A new name on the Git repo, Dylan TCE14, no title, no department, no introduction, just a Git push and a bad feeling. The first time I met Dylan, he was wearing Yeezys and a smirk that said, "I just discovered Stack Overflow." He introduced himself like we were on a game show. "Hey, Dylan Thompson, technical consultant/transformation liaison," held out a hand like he expected confetti to fall from the ceiling. I just blinked at him, thumbed the enter key, and said, "Linda." No title, no enthusiasm. Just Linda, with a terminal window full of logic he couldn't comprehend if it came with emojis and a voiceover. Turns out technical consultant was code for CEO's nephew with admin privileges and no adult supervision. He didn't ask where the coffee was, asked why we didn't microservice the transactional ingestion layer. I told him that was like trying to turn a freight train into a fleet of scooters mid-delivery. He laughed, actually laughed, said, "Sounds like you're still living in a monolith mindset." If I had a nickel for every time some fresh out of bootcamp buzzword barista came in and insulted code that survived 3 mergers and 2 cloud migrations, could have retired with a beachfront Wi-Fi signal and never touched JSON again. Dylan walked around the office like he owned it, which, to be fair, he practically did. When he wasn't name-dropping Kafka or quoting Twitter threads like scripture, he was actively calling my team's code crustware. His favorite insult: anything written before COVID, crustware. Anything without a sync/await, crustware. Anything with semicolons, you guessed it, really made my molars grind was when he started joining our dev stand-ups uninvited. Just rolled his swivel chair in, cross-legged like a damn influencer on a podcast set, and started asking questions like, "So why don't we just refactor this in Go?" Because the compliance platform isn't a side hustle, I wanted to say. Instead, I nodded, took notes, smiled the kind of smile that only women in tech over 40 have mastered, the one that says, "I survived Flash. I can survive you." Then came the kicker, the email from our director. "Linda, Dylan will be assisting with refactoring your section of the code base, particularly the transaction logic." My section. The one that processed live updates for partner balances, multi-vendor sync, and fraud detection failsafes. The one I'd poured 18 years into, refining through outages, audits, and one near-litigation disaster. Now this linked-in larva was going to assist. I replied, noted. The next week was death by commit. Dylan pushed 5 updates without peer review, no unit tests, no changelog, just vague comments like cleaned up old junk and streamlined loop. He added a library we didn't need, removed a check that wasn't flashy enough, and refactored one module so hard the junior devs were Googling whether it still existed. When I flagged one deletion in our PR thread, legacy error handler that had saved our butts in 2016, I wrote, "Please explain the rationale for removing this logic." His reply didn't seem relevant, looked like dead code. Dead code. That handler was the reason we'd never had a double withdrawal in 8 years. It was the reason a $1.2M transaction glitch got fixed in under 4 seconds during the February release cycle. Now it was gone because the CEO's nephew didn't feel like it was relevant. I took a deep breath, reopened my private backup logs, and started documenting everything. Every single line. The line he erased didn't look like much. Just a single if statement tucked deep inside a transaction resolution function, quiet as a church mouse with duct tape on its mouth. But I knew better. That line was the goddamn levy. I wrote it in 2009, after a bug in our vendor sync logic caused a batch of transfers to vanish into the void. Took 2 weeks, 3 sleep-deprived engineers, and a $90K client appeasement check to clean it up. That line was the fix. A conditional failsafe that forced rollback and revalidation before funds could post to any external ledger. Nothing flashy, nothing modern, just reliable. Kind of code that doesn't make product demos but keeps lawsuits off the table. I noticed it was gone when I ran a dry test on Dylan's latest commit. At first, I thought I'd pulled the wrong branch. But no, there it was, my handler, gutted like a deer in hunting season. Not deprecated, not commented out, just gone like it had never existed. I scrolled through his commit notes. Just one line, / cleaned up legacy condition, didn't seem necessary. Didn't seem necessary. I walked over to his desk. Calm, professional, I've raised kids, I've dealt with outages, I know how to keep my voice steady. "Hey Dylan," I said, "I saw you remove the failsafe in TXN Resolver Pi. That's not dead code. That's there to prevent partial ledger writes in edge cases, vendor lag, race conditions, things like that." He didn't even look up from his Red Bull, just grinned. "Oh, that thing? Looked like something from the Y2K panic. Super crusty." I figured we didn't need it anymore with the new vendor APIs. I blinked. "You figured?" "Yeah," he said, spinning in his chair like he was auditioning for a startup reality show. "I mean, if it was important, it would have been in the docs, right? It was in the docs. The real docs, not the Confluence mess the new PMs slapped together with emojis and GIFs. I even linked to the internal audit report that explained exactly why that line existed. Dylan didn't check the docs. Dylan didn't check anything. I nodded, walked back to my desk, and quietly opened my off-network backup. I keep one for every release cycle, not because I'm paranoid, but because I've seen what happens when people stop being careful. This one was already tagged. Q3 PRE Dylan. I cloned it locally and added a comment in bold, red next to the missing line. / removed failsafe for transaction resolution. Flagged for review. Then I emailed our manager. Not with rage, not with blame, just facts. Subject line, failsafe removal in commit D45B1CF concerns. I included a link to the audit report, a screenshot of Dylan's deletion, a reminder that this specific logic had prevented vendor mismatch issues during peak loads in 3 prior quarters. My recommendation, reinstate or formally review before live release. Her reply, 3 hours later, "Thanks for flagging. Let's keep an eye on it. For now, document and let it go." That was her favorite phrase, let it go. Like we were all Elsa with a GitHub repo, so I let it go. I let it go straight into a timestamped backup, a printed log, and a flash drive I started carrying in my purse. Because I didn't know when it would break, only that it would. It started with whispers. Not the juicy kind you overhear by the Keurig, but the Slack pings in the night, calendar invites without you kind. Meetings multiplying like gremlins in the dark. Strategy sessions. Cross-functional integration brainstorms. A new internal repo titled Phoenix 2025. I wasn't invited to a single one. Dylan, however, front and center. His face started showing up in team-wide update threads, sitting next to our director in screenshots, like he'd just solved world hunger with a JavaScript library. Suddenly, he was leading stand-ups, authoring deployment plans, even getting quoted in internal newsletters. Agile realignment, championed by Dylan Thompson, paves way for faster vendor syncs. Vendor syncs, my domain, the code I built, the logic he just half-gutted like he was speedrunning a legacy purge. When I asked our manager if I should be in the loop, reply was smooth as a glass of lukewarm indifference. Linda, your work's been invaluable, but Dylan's initiative is part of our modernization track. We don't want to bog it down with legacy perspectives. Your expertise is just too specialized for this phase. Too specialized. That's what they call it when they don't want to say too old to listen to anymore. The next few days blurred into a fog of passive exclusions. I'd hear coworkers talking about Friday's deployment in the break room, then go back to my desk and find no such date on any of my calendars. I'd log into Jenkins and see a new branch being built with commit names like refactor TXN path v2 and removed deprecated flags I personally wrote. When I pushed for code review, no response. When I opened a ticket questioning the missing redundancy layers, closed with a smiley face and a working as intended comment. Isolation like that doesn't hit all at once. It's slow, like being erased in pencil. I started second-guessing myself. Was I just being territorial? Was I clinging too hard to the past? Then the junior dev from finance pinged me. Quiet, almost sheepish. Hey Linda, quick question. Did we change the fallback handler for real-time transfers? I'm getting some weird behavior when latency spikes. Asked for his logs. Sure enough, there it was, transactions hanging instead of rerouting. Failover logic simply not triggering. Who signed off on this, I asked. It's part of the Q3 deployment, Dylan's branch. Q3, that was in 10 days. 10 days until every major partner API, Visa, Stripe, Wells, would expect millisecond perfect ledgers from our side. 10 days until Dylan's butchered, LSA-free Frankenstein version of the system was scheduled to go live, and they still hadn't looped me in. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, watching the green glow of my monitor reflecting off a Diet Coke can, flipping through the commit logs like they were crime scene photos. Every function Dylan had touched, I flagged. Every error I'd caught in staging, I copied. And every concern I'd documented but been ignored on, I printed. 16 pages by the end, neatly stapled, dated, backed up twice. Once on a hard drive in my bottom drawer, once in a folder titled When IT Happens. Because the thing about storms is, they never show up on time, but you always hear the rumble. The day of the launch felt like a funeral wrapped in a pep rally, balloons in the break room, muffins, Slack message from the CEO himself with too many exclamation points. Excited for today's transformation milestone. Let's show our partners how fast we can move. They even had a name for it, Velocity 2.0. God help us. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the boardroom lights dimmed. Dylan stood in front of the giant monitor in a blazer he probably bought that morning. Product heads, legal, vendor liaisons from all over the country joined via video call. He clicked through his slides like a Silicon Valley magician. Big words, fancy diagrams, not a single mention of risk mitigation, nothing about rollbacks, and definitely nothing about the removed failsafe. I sat at my cubicle, not invited, not acknowledged, just watching the system dashboard in the corner of my screen, quietly logging every heartbeat of our infrastructure like it was a patient on life support. 9:30 a.m., deployment initiated. I could see Jenkins purring along like a dog about to bite the hand petting it. New modules pushed. Legacy flags bypassed. Dylan's code branching out like ivy, wrapping itself around the transaction loop like it belonged there. At first, everything seemed fine. The dashboard stayed green. First few transactions processed clean. Dylan grinned in the boardroom like he'd just cured cancer with a post-it note. But I watched the latency spikes. Tiny tremors. 0.2 seconds, then 0.5, then 1.3. I leaned forward, tapped my keyboard, opened the vendor sync logs. A few of the vendor endpoints weren't responding fast enough, standard during high load, but something was off. Instead of retrying, the transactions just sat. Then the messages started. Client account 82,754 showing pending funds not cleared. Please advise. Debit posted, but no confirmation on ledger balance. User reporting zero balance after attempted top-up. Urgent. Then came the Slack pings. First a trickle, then a flood. Hash prod issues right arrow 9 new messages. Hash vendorlations right arrow stripe is calling. Are we throttling them? Hash compliance alerts right arrow seeing negative balances on 3 test accounts. This real? I clicked into the heartbeat monitor. Processing time spiked. Successful ledger syncs dropping fast. Rollback flags silent. Because Dylan had deleted the only damn condition that would have caught it, and now the system didn't know how to fail, so it just kept spinning. Trying, waiting, drowning. At 10:02 a.m., the production environment went into what we call gray death. Not a crash, worse, a hang. Users weren't getting errors, they were getting nothing, just spinning wheels, locked accounts, frozen balances. To them, their money had disappeared. I looked across the floor toward the war room. Through the glass, I could see movement. People pacing. Dylan was no longer smiling. Our director had her hand over her mouth. One of the vendor reps looked like he was about to vomit into a trash can. Meanwhile, my heart pounded so loud I could hear it over the soft hum of the AC unit. I knew exactly what was happening. I also knew exactly why it was happening. I stood up slowly, walked back to my desk, took a long breath, slipped the printed log of Dylan's commits from my drawer, plugged in my backup flash drive, double-checked the timestamp on the deleted line. The same one I flagged, the same one I warned about, the same one that could have stopped this mess in milliseconds. Grabbed my coffee and headed toward the war room. The war room looked like a tech exorcism. Every screen was red, charts nosediving, alert dashboards blinking like a Vegas slot machine having a seizure. Phones rang non-stop, internal, external, vendor hotlines. Someone from legal was already on a call with outside counsel. Someone else was dry heaving into a recycling bin. Dylan stood near the head of the table, gesturing wildly at a wall of code he barely understood, his voice trying and failing to sound authoritative. I think what we're dealing with is unexpected legacy recursion clashing with the modernized transaction pathing. Legacy recursion. He said it like it was a dirty word. I stood just outside the room, watching through the glass like I was at an aquarium filled with drowning fish. And there, in the digital swirl of panic, my Slack pinged. Chris J. Junior Dev, Linda, didn't you have a guard clause for this? Like, wasn't there a failsafe or something? I didn't type back. Instead, I walked slowly, calmly back to my desk. I sat down, plugged in my flash drive, opened my archive, the backup I'd made the day Dylan deleted the line. Then I pulled up the commit logs. Screenshot Dylan's change. Next to it, my comment. / removed failsafe for transaction resolution, flagged for review. I copied the file tree into a PDF. Highlighted the lines in question. Took another screenshot, this time of the timestamp, the audit link, and my email to the manager warning about it. Each piece of evidence like a brick. Next, I opened Jenkins and took a snapshot of the deployment log, showing his push and the direct correlation between his commit and the final deployment time. Then I opened Confluence. Scrolled to the old documentation page he never read. One marked archive, transaction safety conditions. Screenshot, add to folder. Slack pinged again. Chris J. Legal just asked who authored the original ledger loop. I told them it was you. They said you're needed in the war room. I took one last sip of my lukewarm coffee, printed everything, grabbed my laptop, and walked. When I entered the room, no one noticed at first. They were too busy trying to patch a bleeding artery with a Hello Kitty bandage. Executives pointing fingers. Engineers sweating bullets. Compliance yelling over each other like it was the goddamn Super Bowl. But I didn't need to yell. I walked to the side table. Opened my laptop, plugged into the projector. The room went dim as my desktop took over the main screen. I clicked once. On the monitor appeared a GitHub commit window. One line highlighted in red, deleted. A comment didn't seem necessary. Then I clicked again. An email from me, our manager, 3 weeks ago. Flagging the removal, outlining the risk. Click, the PDF, every warning, every timestamp, every receipt. I didn't say a word. But my calm fury filled every inch of the room. I didn't knock, didn't pause, didn't ask. I just opened the door, walked into the war room like it was mine, clipboard under one arm, laptop in the other, coffee in hand. The kind of coffee that had gone from hot to cold to insultingly lukewarm. Kind of coffee that perfectly matched my mood. Tired, acidic, and fully caffeinated for vengeance. No one stopped me. They parted instinctively like a school of nervous fish sensing a much larger predator had entered the tank. Dylan was still mid-blame shuffle. It's probably a hiccup with legacy rollback logic, something in the old stack that's rejecting the new post hooks. I flagged this early on, but I reached the projector cable, plugged it in. No words, no permission. My laptop screen flooded the wall. A GitHub commit, timestamped, highlighted the red line where my failsafe used to be. If vendor confirmed, rollback transaction, log discrepancy, comment above it from Dylan, / cleaned up deprecated conditional seemed unnecessary than my internal email. Subject, urgent removal of transaction failsafe logic. Dated, attached documentation. Risk outlined in bold. The PDF, 16 pages of receipts. Every audit log, every flagged warning, every line that screamed, "This will break," all ignored. The room went dead silent. You could hear the HVAC click on. CTO leaned forward, his mouth slightly open, brow furrowed like he'd just spotted the gun in a game of Clue. Legal looked like she was already rewriting the breach disclosure in her head. I stepped forward, set my clipboard on the table, clicked to the last slide. A side-by-side comparison, before and after, working logic versus chaos. Finally, I spoke. One sentence, steady, clear, bulletproof. Here's what was removed, and here's what it did. No drama, no theatrics, just truth weaponized. Dylan opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out, just air. Maybe the echo of his own career imploding in slow motion. The CTO exhaled through his nose. Compliance muttered, "Jesus." The CEO, sitting in the back of the room with his laptop slowly closing, didn't say a word. Didn't have to. Because in that moment, it was over. Not the outage, not the fallout, him. You could have dropped a thumbtack and it would have echoed off the drywall. No blinking cursors, no typing. Just the low, humming grief of realization settling into the bones of every overpaid exec in the room. The CTO leaned back slowly, kind of lean that says I'm recalculating my entire week, and maybe my career. He let out this long, sharp exhale through his nose, like all the oxygen in the room was suddenly personal to him. The head of compliance muttered, barely audible, unbelievable. Legal closed her binder with a sound that felt like a gavel. And Dylan, oh Dylan, he tried to speak, really tried. That first stutter came out like a bad Wi-Fi signal. I mean, we're assuming the newer vendor contracts wouldn't. I didn't think. No one looked at him. Not one person. He was standing there in a $300 hoodie, hands gesturing like he was still on some startup podcast, but it was over. The energy had shifted, completely. I didn't say another word, didn't have to. I stood there next to the projector like a mortician showing the autopsy photos. Calm, present, unshakable. The CEO, who'd been silent this whole time, silent when Dylan rewrote the roadmap, silent when half the senior engineers were pushed out, silent through every ignored warning, finally moved. He stared at the screen a moment longer, then closed his laptop. Softly, deliberately, the click of that latch was louder than any scream. Still no one spoke. Dylan reached for his phone, probably to Slack someone, to ping PR, to Google how to delete commit history without trace. But it didn't matter. Already committed the one thing you can't roll back, arrogance. I picked up my clipboard, turned off the projector, walked toward the door. As I passed Dylan, he flinched like he expected a glare or a snide remark. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I didn't need revenge, because I'd just watched a room full of executives witness truth, and the silence that followed was the loudest respect I'd ever heard. Dylan was gone before lunch. Not fired, not officially. Would have required admitting fault. But reassigned to strategic innovation partnerships might as well have been corporate hospice. His keycard access was revoked before noon. By 1 p.m., his desk was cleaned out by a silent intern and a box labeled MISC. Someone even peeled his name off the whiteboard like it had never existed. No one said goodbye. No Slack farewell thread. No cupcake send-off. Just a vacuum where his ego used to sit. Meanwhile, got a calendar invite. Subject, Transaction Stack Review CTO and Engineering Leads, W/Linda location. Executive Conference Room A, 3 floors above where I normally existed. I went. Of course I went. They didn't make a big show of it, no confetti, no apology banners, but they listened. They asked real questions, took real notes. The CTO opened with, "Walk us through how it was designed to fail without breaking." I smiled, not smug, just steady. I pulled up the same diagrams I'd built years ago, the boring ones, the ones that were too dense for Dylan to read, the ones that kept this company solvent for 18 straight years. And I walked them through the code like I was giving a tour of a fortress, flaws and all, every brick explained. By the end of the session, the whiteboard was full. My initials were written in the corner, next to 3 new items under action required. Last one read, new policy. Legacy logic deletion requires dual sign-off. One must be from original architect. Underneath, someone added in black marker, Linda. I didn't say much, I nodded, collected my laptop, walked out before they could clap or awkwardly try to thank me for my leadership, because I didn't want praise. I wanted the damn system to work. Later that afternoon, I went back to my desk, quiet, back to the cubicle they forgot to move me out of. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window that overlooked the parking lot full of leased Teslas and forgotten ideas. I opened the new code documentation repo, and there it was. Author, L. Granger, original implementation and fail-safe design, not legacy. Not deprecated, not crustware. Just mine. I sipped my tea, no celebration, no speeches. Just a system that worked again. And this time, they knew who built it. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.